Welcome to the Wealth Gap Warriors podcast, where we dive deep into the pressing issue of wealth inequality in communities of color, cultural money beliefs, and personal finance.
Some of our families are struggling. Even people are actually homeless.
Join us as we interview inspiring individuals and organizations across the United States who are dedicated to eradicating this disparity through their creative solutions and innovative approaches.
Together, let's explore how we can build a more equitable society for all. Here's your host, Luis Barajas. Let's get into it.
Welcome, everybody, to Wealth Gap Warriors podcast. I am beyond excited today to have Jannese Torres on with me, who is launching her brand new book called Financially Lit. I have it here, The Modern Latina's Guide to Level Up Your Dinero and Become Financially Poderosa. By the time the podcast comes out, her book will be out. And you guys are going to want to run to Amazon or any bookstore and pick up the book. It's phenomenal. I got an advanced copy, read it. We're going to talk about the book, but we're also going to talk about Jannese's life journey. And I just want to, and basically, I'll read something real quick that she has in her book. It says, Jannese Torres is an award-winning Latina money expert. Her English language personal finance podcast and platform, Quiero, Dinero, empowers Latinas and people of color on personal finance topics like entrepreneurship, financial independence, building generational wealth, investing, and money mindset through the guest interviews and solo episodes. Quiero, Dinero is a podcast that I've been on. I admire all the work ethic she's done just to get to this point. I am excited. Jannese, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, so let's start off. I would love for our audience just to get to know who you really are. The purpose of this is we call it the Wealth Gap Warriors podcast. And for people out there who are nationally doing something to empower Latino communities of color to build wealth, as you've written so elegantly in the book, how even Latinas have struggled to get to where they're at right now. But I want you to share with my audience your personal journey of kind of where you started from, and what inspired you. You have such an interesting background, but to get to where you're at right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's not a linear path. I always tell people this was not part of the plan because I did not go to school for finance. I went to school for engineering. And one of the reasons for that is because as a eldest daughter of Latino parents, I was given very specific instructions about what my career options were. And it was doctor, lawyer, or engineer. So I knew I didn't want to argue with people for a living. I knew I wasn't going to be good in the medical field. I'm just, I have an aversion to things that can turn your stomach. So engineering was my path to, quote unquote, achieve the American dream. And so I set out, went to college, first in my family to get a master's. I've worked for Fortune 50 companies like Johnson & Johnson and L'Oreal. And for me, reaching that level of success, while on paper it looked great, I did not feel fulfilled. And so I started to question everything that we've been told traditionally, just follow that checklist and that's the key to success. And for me, it didn't feel anything like that. It felt almost like I was imprisoned by choices that we're told are good decisions, like going to school and getting into a bunch of debt, or buying a house that you can't afford because that's just what people do to be responsible with money. And so that led me down the path of discovering the financial independence movement, which is an alternative lifestyle where people decide to kind of opt out of the rat race. They decide to invest, start businesses, and basically get to a point where you no longer need traditional work. And so I started listening to podcasts, started learning so much about financial literacy in a way that I never got, at home. And after having multiple conversations with my peer group, which was primarily Latinas and women of color, I kept realizing that I was one of the only people in my circle that was even aware of these topics or having these conversations. And so I figured if there's enough women around me who don't know what's going on with dinero, then maybe there's even more of us. And so in 2019, I launched the podcast, Yo Quiero Dinero, inspired by the Cardi B and J-Lo song, Dinero. And it has now become a 5-time award-winning podcast, the #1 podcast for Latinas in personal finance. And I get to do this incredible work of helping Latinas and women of color bridge the gap.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. I mean, you've done tremendous work. I want though, the thing is, like you said, there's something that's not linear, right? So, I mean, even in your work towards getting from 2009 to here, I want to know the internal struggles. I want people to understand because there's a lot of people that follow us are already leaders like you, believe it or not, who reach certain points where they want to give up. And, because right now they're going to see you, they see that beautiful picture of you behind, the book there that you got. You're going to be going on the Financially Lit book tour. They're going to come to you. People are going to want you to sign their books. They're going to see you as very successful. But as you and I know that we've gone through this journey, a different paths, but kind of very similar. There are times where I've thrown the keys and said, I'll never want to work with Latinos again. I can't do this anymore. It's such a struggle. Share with people who are also struggling out there to help other Latinos or other people of color. Some of your journey of where it got difficult, but somehow you just had the fortitude or the resilience to just keep hanging on and keep going.
Yeah, I think when people look at entrepreneurs, they don't understand the level of sacrifice and struggle that is behind the success that you're aspiring to. So for me, as a self-employed person, like I've been dabbling in the world of online business and content creation for over a decade. So what you see now is just years and years of experimentation and learning and failure and trying again. I have to think that part of it is because I just have a natural stubborn streak. I think there's a lot of people who can identify with like, maybe you have a little bit of an inner rebel and you just don't like being told that you can't do something. So for me, that's definitely part of like where the fire comes from. But I also think that it has to do a lot with my ability to be a perpetual learner. I think when you're just okay, not always knowing everything, but just knowing enough to take one step forward, that is usually enough to propel you to the next point where then you can just supplement your experience or your education to continue to get to eventually where you want to be.
Yeah. What about some sharing with us, maybe some epiphanies you've had when you got to the Fortune 50? I will share with you, a kid growing out of Boyle Heights of East Los Angeles. My goal was one day to work with a big firm. I ended up working with Kenneth Thunderfall, became Ernst & Young. We used to have some really big clients. And I realized that when I got to that level, I was working with these really huge clients. So the environment, though, within it, which I was working at this big firm that everybody aspired to be, was nothing more than a sweatshop. I thought, oh, my God, when I get to the big time, when I get to work at this big firm, and then I realized there's nothing more than taking control of your life and your future, right? Mm-hmm. But sometimes what happens when we come from neighborhoods or communities that where our parents didn't have money or we didn't have access to a lot of stuff, we have these illusions or this imagination that people who live or work in certain environments must know more than we do, must do better work than we do. And one of the things that I said when I was there, I said, one day when I have my own firm or run my own practice, whatever, I'll never hire a big firm like this because they just can't do the quality of work. I actually work with clients that are like, I work with other Latino clients that are mid-sized firms or smaller firms. They pay more attention to me than anything else. What were some of your epiphanies going through that process?
Well, I think I have unique experience in being a millennial and graduating into the worst economic crisis in modern history. And so although I was told that a corporate career was super stable, I saw anything but that. I was part of several mergers and acquisitions. I saw layoffs after layoff. I saw people, instead of being hired full time, now all of a sudden half of our staff was contractors with no benefits. And so graduating into that environment made me realize that this safe, stable career path that I was told is not so safe and stable. And in my own experience, I found that the most stable career I've had is the one that I've created for myself. So it's been sort of a wake-up call. And I like to tell folks, one income stream is close enough to zero. And many of us do not even put any thought into potentially diversifying your income streams and giving yourself that level of financial protection that I think is essential at this point. And, just from the lens of being usually the only Latina, the only woman of color in male-dominated engineering spaces, I quickly found how hostile that environment can be. And just like how you are continuously subject to microaggressions, to stupid comments, just people not having any kind of cultural nuance and context for like what it's like to work with diverse groups of people. And so I found that I have been able to reclaim my identity as a Latina way more in the world of entrepreneurship than I ever could in corporate America.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. Now you make your shift into the money space. And as you're learning about money, I want you to share with our audience as well, what were some of your epiphanies that you had? Because, one of the things that I will share with you, I left this world where there was a lot of poverty in Royal Heights, make it out, end up working with multimillionaires and billionaires. And I go back to the community. Now, this is the 90s before there was any books written for Latinos, right? And on finance. And I thought, well, financial literacy. And again, I came from great parents. I had a loving chaplain. Didn't know that, when you come from that environment, you don't even know that you're poor.
Yeah.
You come out, start working with these multimillionaires and billionaires. And then what I did was I went back to the barrio, to the community. And then I realized financial literacy is the answer. And then I realized, oh my God, it's the mindset of our community that's holding us back. If somehow we can become self-aware of some limiting cultural beliefs that are sabotaging us from reaching success. And you also write about that at the beginning of your book, which I think is something that our audience needs to hear constantly and be reminded and become self-aware. Share with us some of those mindset ideas that when you were thinking about money, that you've actually created shifts in your mind, and now that you're teaching other women.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think there's this sort of general narrative that we must be grateful for whatever we're given, and it's somehow uncouth to, ask for more. And so one big example for that was job hopping. Job hopping was seen as a very negative thing in my family. It was seen as something that makes you look unprofessional, something that makes you look like, you're a flight risk. But for me, it was key to increasing my salary from $42,000 to over $100,000 in less than 7 years. When we think about those 2 and 3% cost of living raises that you get at an employer, there's no way that you're going to be able to make big strides with your income unless you just are okay with, doing the job hopping and going after the opportunities that are going to put more money in your pocket, regardless of this sense of loyalty that you're somehow going to violate, And I think this goes back to kind of what I saw in the corporate environment of just there was no loyalty to the individual employee. People were disposable. People were numbers. And so, that's one big thing that I talk about in the book is just the power of negotiation and salaries and just asking for what you're worth and being unapologetic about what you want. And then I think there's just a lot of collective trauma that people are completely unaware of that can sabotage the way that you operate with money. So for instance, if you think that you're just you're afraid of investing, for example, a lot of people see investing as gambling because they don't actually understand it. And they're more comfortable giving their money to lottery providers than they are to the stock market, even though when you look at the odds of becoming a millionaire in the stock market versus becoming a millionaire with the lottery, the data is very clear. Millionaires are made on Wall Street. They're not made at the bodega with the lottery ticket. So there's just this collective shift that needs to happen where people stop being so skeptical of proven ways to build wealth. And I think the more that we have people in our own community showing what is possible and showing that we can also do this, the more that people can actually believe that they can also do it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Talk to me a little bit more about the scarcity mindset. So, we talked about that, but the scarcity mindset that you also talk about in your book, because I think that usually I will share with you that even within ourselves as Latinos who are there to help each other out. When I have dinners or behind closed doors and I'm talking to very successful Latinas or Latinos, when I ask them, who helped you get to the next level? Somebody says, well, it was this Jewish white old man. It was this lady. It was this gringa who helped me out. And I noticed that within our own community, sometimes, we don't help each other out, but there's a lot of scarcity mindset that we have to overcome as a community. And I think you write so elegantly. Share with us a little bit about that mindset.
Yeah, I think it's a mindset that really is toxic and it holds us back because it's this perception that there is not enough. And it's completely understandable why people would think that when you come from an environment where you just see poverty as the norm and this aspiration for wealth is seen as something that only white people can achieve. So it does require sort of becoming aware of where that scarcity mindset was originally formed. If you saw and experienced poverty growing up, of course you're going to have a scarcity mindset until you become a part of different environments and you start seeing that this is not the only option for us. I definitely recommend, and I talk about this in the book, like most of us need therapy because most of us have some sort of financial trauma that is associated with the way that you were raised and the way that you saw your caretakers operate with money. And there's nothing wrong or shameful about getting support from your mental health aspect, because at the end of the day, I found that time and time again, I can give people the strategy for how to build wealth, pay off your debt, save your money, invest it, start different businesses, increase your income, all that stuff. I can tell you to do all that. But if you don't actually address the root cause of your money beliefs and of your money trauma, it's going to go in through one ear and go out the other. So we have to start with the foundation, which is believing what is possible for you and healing any kind of trauma that you have experienced with money.
And I am 1000% behind that. And the reason for that is that no amount of financial literacy can help you if you don't heal those traumas, because eventually what they do is they sabotage you. Because I work with so many Latino, I work with a lot of entertainers, baseball players who come from poverty, build a certain amount of wealth. And I will share with you that those untreated traumas come back and sabotage a lot of those people. And there's a lot of, they go backwards. They don't heal and they end up losing everything. Mm-hmm. So it is one of the foundations, and it's important to hear it over and over again. And I guess become self-aware of what's actually going to be an obstacle that we are going to create. Sometimes we think that there are obstacles that are out of our control, but these are the biggest obstacles that are within control. And that's what, like you said, sometimes even there are therapists that deal with just finances and the way you think about money. There's specialists for that. Mm-hmm. Talk to me about in your book where you talk about where you really have to have a clear vision of where you want to end up, where you want to have, what your financial goals. Why is that important versus just starting to save money? Why do you need to have that clear vision?
Well, I think it comes back to aligning your spending with your actual values, right? Because when I think about my own experience, I feel like I was kind of on a treadmill or just in autopilot where I was marking off all of these things that you're supposed to do with money. Buy a house, get married, go to school, all of that stuff. But there was no greater why other than this is just what you do as an adult, right? And so what can happen for a lot of people is that they find themselves having made a bunch of decisions that have huge financial impacts, but not actually assessing, is this what I wanted to do? Or is this some other person's narrative or some other person's script that I'm now living? So I found myself in that place, early 30s, having checked off all the list. And I'm like, I don't even want to own a house. I don't want to be stuck in the same place for, 30 years. I do not like having to call somebody to fix the toilet or replace the roof because I just don't want to spend money in that way. And so I had to kind of dismantle all of these thoughts that I had been, indoctrinated with around what I should be doing with my money and get very clear on what does financial freedom look like to me. And at this point, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So, financial freedom to me at this point does not involve home ownership because I just like to have a lot of flexibility in my life. I want to be able to pick up and go. I've been entertaining the idea of becoming a digital nomad. And so it just doesn't make sense for me. And I think we have to be okay with our version of success, not necessarily meeting somebody else's definition of it. And that's why I think it's so powerful to ask yourself, what do you want to do with your money? And then go from there.
Yeah. What I think that when people are listening to you, as I listen to you, you said this word, I had to dismantle my thoughts. I had to dismantle the old way, how I was taught that I should think about money, right? What I want people to understand that it's not easy to dismantle your thoughts, especially with the people that you're hanging around with, right? With the people that you're associating with your parents constantly telling you, "¿Cómo mija que no quieres tener tu propia casa?" That's That's number one success. You have buy your own house, right? Every Latino I meet, the first thing is buy their own house.
Right.
And sometimes it's not the most important thing. So tell me about some of the work that you personally did. What, maybe you read books, maybe you hired a therapist. How did you get to the point where you were able to dismantle the thoughts, where you finally became self-aware that maybe the way you had been thinking wasn't working for you? What happened, or what did you do to dismantle those thoughts?
Well, I think it started with understanding that there are a lot of different perceptions and there's no right way to do anything. When it comes to money, there's basic ground rules, right? But you can actually create much of those rules yourself once you start thinking about what's actually important to you. So listening to conversations about financial independence and coming to the realization that retirement is not about turning 65, that it's actually about having a specific amount of money in your investment accounts and in your, as your net worth. That for me was a huge wake up call that, oh, wait a minute. I don't actually need to wait until I'm like old and sick in order to enjoy my life. If I can make these changes in my financial situation now, I can go and live the retired life in my 40s versus in my 60s. So it was definitely surrounding myself with different people, different ideas. And I started using this sort of guiding light as to how to make financial decisions. And I say to myself, I will not take financial advice from people who are not living the life that I want to live. And you got to be okay with becoming or just like going on a different plane than the people around you. You have to be okay with potentially disappointing people. And you have to be okay with just not everybody understanding it. I think we care sometimes too much about like other people's opinions about what we're doing. But at the end of the day, if that person is not living the lifestyle that you aspire to, then you really do not need to put a lot of weight behind their opinions of what you're doing.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's fantastic. Tell me about share with us some of the constant struggles that the people that are in your world right now that are coming to you, all the Latina women, what are they struggling with? What are you hearing the most? What's consistent within our community, the Latina community of Jannese, I need your help with, or what do you think about this? Because I know there's constant themes. What are you listening? What are you hearing right now?
Well, I think if I had to distill it down to one thing, and I don't think this is just impacting Latinas, I think this is impacting everybody in general, is we're just not making enough money. The world has gotten crazy expensive, especially in the past 5 years. And so time and time again, I'm just hearing how much more difficult it is to make financial progress, whether that is saving or investing or paying off debt. And I know the power in being able to increase your income. I think oftentimes when we think about how to improve our finances, we automatically go to cut, restrict, like budget, spend less, coupon clipping, all that stuff. And there's some validity in being able to just take a look at your finances and seeing where there might be some leaks and where you just might be wasting money. But there is nothing more powerful than increasing your income. And so that's primarily where I like to focus in on when it comes to making bigger financial impact. You can only cut so much, but your ability to earn income is theoretically unlimited, especially if you take the advantage of the system that is to your benefit in the tax code as an investor and as an entrepreneur.
1000% agree. I've been talking about that for forever. For 30 years, I use a budget to just kind of take a look at what the cash flow needs are for retirement, or I don't even call it retirement anymore, just basically to make work optional. Mm-hmm. But everything has been a focus on when you're working in communities of color where there's poverty. The very first thing that all nonprofits do is focus on budget and credit. And they don't focus on how can you invest in yourself to become more valuable, to be able to create more revenue, more income, or look for ways, right? Like you talk about in your book, again, so elegantly. Talk to us a little bit about the FIRE movement. I mean, I think that also was an inspiration to you, right? That kind of gave you that the juice to say, I want to be able to get to the point where, explain to us what the FIRE movement is, where you retire early, but explain to us how that motivates you, because it's also in your book.
Absolutely. So for anyone who hasn't heard of it, it stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early. And it's a movement that started right around the late 1990s, but it really took steam during the Great Recession because there was a lot of folks who saw their entire life savings wiped out in a matter of days or weeks, right? People lost homes, their retirement portfolios were decimated. And so there was this collective unrest, if you will, that started in American society where it's just like, okay, but I played by all the rules and I still got screwed. So what's next? And so, there's been folks who have kind of given an alternative path to financial freedom. And that looks like really getting intense with your saving and your investing. Folks who are followers of the financial independence movement typically invest and save upwards of like 50% or more of their income. And they're very aggressive about cutting back spending and, just creating additional income streams that can allow you to opt out of work sooner than later. And the idea is, hey, I don't want to wait until I'm 65 to be able to go and travel or spend more time with my kids or, pursue that passion project that I don't have any time to do because I'm just wrapped up in the minutia of work. So for me, that was a really inspiring topic that, again, I'd never heard of in our community. And it's still very much a novel concept because, again, a lot of people still have this perception that it's 65. You can't retire before 65. It's just not a thing. But the more that I was exposed to the ideas, I realized I had a lot of tools that would allow me to do this. One, I had a high earning job. I've always lived below my means. I've had side hustles. And so I've been able to combine all of those different advantages to now get to a place where my retirement is already secured. I was able to walk away from my corporate job and be able to pursue entrepreneurship full time. And I get to live the lifestyle of a retired person that gets to just wake up and be excited about what I'm going to do every day in my late 30s. So I want more people to understand this is not an illusion. This is also accessible to us. But again, fundamentally, you need money to be able to do this. And this is why I'm so passionate about helping people learn how to increase their income because money is freedom.
Yeah. I think that one of the biggest misconceptions on the retire early, because I'm always said that people retire because they hate their job.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, they want the flexibility, right? And I kind of work with financial independence, but make work optional because people then enjoy life by doing what they want to do, but they still say productive by doing like what you're doing, right? Technically, you're not retired, you're working, right, but you're doing what you love to do, but work is optional for you.
Exactly.
Because when somebody tells me I want to retire, I go, that's because you're basically you hate your job and you hate your life and you want to change everything. We got to get you to the point where you have enough money then you can change everything to be able to live the lifestyle that you want to, that makes you want to wake up in the morning and have fun and change people's lives and yada, yada, yada. So wonderful concept. Where I know that you've got other interviews coming right now because you've got the financial list. So I want to end just with a couple more questions. I'm going to take one, believe it or not, from your book, because one of the things that your book has, Jannese, is that every chapter has questions that are for self-reflective kind of questions. I'm going to use these on you. I'm going to go.
Let's do it. I'm
going to use these on you, and I want you to share with me. Just go top of mind. It's just tell me exactly, and we'll go through these. Wealth to me represents
freedom.
When I think about it, there you go. When I think about having a substantial amount of money, I imagine myself
empowered.
Beautiful. My relationship with money is influenced by my upbringing in the sense that
I know where I come from, but I also know what's possible.
You never thought that we would use these questions back on.
No, this is so good.
I'm telling you right now, because again, like I said, these are some wonderful questions that they're in the book that I think that if people went through them, they'll realize that, right now you're giving the answers, but I know that you've had a lot of time to reflect and people will write down the answer. They're going to have to go through this again several times.
Yeah.
If I were to acquire significant wealth, I believe it would impact my life by
being able to retire my parents.
Beautiful. I often associate wealth with
whiteness, which I'm still breaking down.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. We're going to talk about that later.
Yeah.
One fear I have about pursuing wealth is, or maybe what fear you had before you had been pursuing your wealth?
I think one that I have right now is feeling like, when is enough enough? Knowing where that line is.
I've struggled with that for years. And, sometimes I feel I have enough. And then I see other friends and I get that, fear of missing out, right? That FOMO. I go, I can have that, but yeah. I feel most confident and empowered when it comes to money when
I am surrounded by my incredible community.
Very good. My current financial situation makes me feel
unstoppable.
If I think did they tell you I was going to answer?
No.
Okay, all right. If I were to achieve financial abundance, it would allow me to
do whatever I want, which is what I do right now. Yo hago lo que me da la gana.
There you go. When I imagine myself having significant wealth, I feel
like I did that. I deserve it.
Very good. I want to thank you for today. I think you inspire a lot of people. I think you also make people nervous and afraid because they look at you and they think, well, I can't be you, right? I can't be you because we see these, we see that, like you said, you were inspired by the song by Jennifer Lopez and Cardi B, and everybody looks, well, I know there's a lot of hate on Jennifer Lopez, but everybody looks at J-Lo and says, I could never be that person. It must require some kind of supernatural talent or super whatever, but we know that everything you've done to get to this point has been through a lot of sacrifice and a lot of work. If anybody who's been through it knows that it's been a lot of sacrifice and a lot of work. Tell us what's in your future. What have you not accomplished? What do you want to accomplish? What are you? Because I don't think that you have goals. I think that's a strategic byproduct. Everything that you do, there are opportunities that come your way. And then now you have to become very self-aware of what you're willing to turn down versus what you're willing to take on.
Yeah.
Right? And so do you have clarity about what you would want your future to like, or is your future now?
I think my future is now, but I'm also very clear on the idea that I never want this to feel like work. And so I am very comfortable kind of taking the slow and steady pace versus, potentially getting a bunch of investors and taking a bunch of VC money and like scaling this into a 9-figure business. For me, I get to enjoy the life that I've always imagined with my current structure. And so I feel like I have a big privilege to be living my future right now. And the sky's the limit as far as, what's in the future. I just always want to be using the guiding North Star of, is this still fun? And if it's still fun, then I'm going to keep doing it.
Great. Ultimately, what do you want to be known for? So go ahead. If I or somebody were at your eulogy talking about you and he said, I would want them to know me for this, what would you want to be known for?
I'd want to be known for giving Latinas permission to dream bigger and to know that whatever they desire is rightfully theirs, and all they have to do is believe that and move accordingly.
Yeah. It's, I think we want everybody to hear on this whole concept of abundance, that there's enough for all of us. I mean, the thing is that, when I grew up, I didn't know because there wasn't much. And then when you start focusing on working in the world where there's really real wealth, well, we're talking about real wealth. We're talking about, hundreds of millions of thousands of dollars. You realize, God, there's just so much money and there's so much out there. There could be 100 more Jannese Torres that we still couldn't touch and help everybody. More Luis Barajas, and we still couldn't help as many people. There's enough for everyone out there. And Jannese, you're an inspiration. I hope you inspire people to do what you're doing in their communities as well, or even if they're just changing their own families. Because I've always said that, money is power. And when we always talk about Latinos, we always talk about the spending power that Latinos have, but we don't talk about the earning power or the saving power or the investing power. And that's what really changes communities and changes lives and generationally, right?
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for everything you do. You're an honorary Wealth Gap warrior. I appreciate you coming to our podcast. Tell everybody how they get a hold of you, where they find you.
Absolutely. So, yes, thank you so much for having me. It has been an honor. If you want to find out more about my book, Financially Lit, you can get it at financiallylitbook.com. We also have an audiobook version, and it's also going to be coming out in Spanish. So stay tuned for that as well. And I'm also going to be doing a book tour and stopping at a bunch of different cities across the US. So again, you can find out all those details at financiallylitbook.com. And you can listen to Yo Quiero Dinero, the podcast, wherever you're tuning into Wealth Gap Warriors.
Jannese, thank you so much. We appreciate you. And I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Wealth Gap Warriors podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's episode.
I love the show, guys. You're awesome.
Join Lewis next time as we continue our Wealth Gap Warrior journey, creating a brighter future for all.